That was David Bowie with Heroes. It's just coming up to 2 p.m. here at WY Rail Radio, and we have an exciting lineup this afternoon. We've just heard from cinematographer Beth Izzett on styles of film and how to get the perfect shots. And coming up now, we have a visit from a young and upcoming director, Amber Odell. We're going to be speaking to Amber about her upcoming projects, first impressions. Not only will we be discussing the film, we will also be exploring the complex relation between the production of a film and its intended audience. We're happy to have you, Amber.
It's good to be here.
As a young filmmaker, did you make it challenging to explore the medium of short films?
It was a challenge, but one that I welcomed. I put a lot of research into it and spent a lot of time studying the genre, watching films, etc. I think a short film is more challenging creatively in terms of creating an interesting and successful narrative for a contained amount of time. For example, I did struggle with trying to keep my film under the 5-minute mark.
Were there any short films that you drew inspiration from?
In terms of style, I looked to films such as Stripes by Sean Spencer. I took inspiration from the series of detailed and well thought out close-ups used, and incorporated that idea into the cinematography of my own film, though I didn't use a lot of close shots. Instead, I chose to tell the story with a majority of medium and wide shots. And as for the story, I got a lot of ideas from the film Antonio's Breakfast by Daniel Malloy, mainly the themes of family and responsibility that are rooted in the storyline.
So, the short film research you conducted was part of your secondary research, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Alongside this film research, I conducted research based on Marilyn Milgram's The Script. This was incredibly helpful in terms of me building my story and writing my script.
What aspects of Milgram's work in particular did you find most helpful with your own project?
Script was somewhat of a guideline for me throughout my short film project, but there were certain tips and pieces of advice that I found more useful than others. For example, Milgram mentioned that it can be effective to set your film on the premise of a universal occasion. To follow this, I decided to base my narrative on the theme of a first date, which I believe is an idea that, for a short film, provides a lot of interesting material.
What does your primary research consist of?
Well, I tried to gain a wide understanding of my audience through different methods. I used both a paper and an online survey at first to vaguely establish the identity of my audience. I found through this that my audience were generally somewhat familiar with short films, and were used to using streaming services and social media platforms to watch films.
Is it safe to say that you are targeting a younger audience with your film?
Yes, I found that my target audience is formed of under 18-year-olds. This is obviously something I had to consider when I was writing the story of my film, as I wanted to make sure it was age appropriate, mature but not too serious. This also meant I had to ensure my film was relatable enough for a teenage audience.
How did you succeed in making the film relatable for these audiences?
Following some audience research on genre, I found a younger audience does prefer to consume media involving a lot of dramatic narrative. Therefore, by producing a dramatic narrative with teenagers as the main characters, I provided a relatable and interesting piece to be consumed by the audience.
To you, what do you think the most important part of your audience research was?
In terms of my film, a very substantial piece of work was my focus group. I conducted this with a group of peers who are fairly media literate and asked them various questions regarding their film preferences and experiences, and then their feedback regarding the assembly edit of my film.
How was the focus group important to your research?
The focus group was important firstly because the group of people I conducted it with fit the profile of my primary target audience, and therefore I had a perfect insight into how the typical audience member would respond to my film. I also gained a lot of feedback into what works well with the audience and what is less successful.
Going back to the survey, what questions did you ask your audiences?
I asked a few questions regarding the general identity of my participants, such as whereabouts do you live and what is your ethnicity? Aside from that, I asked questions regarding the participants' film habits, such as which platform would you use to watch short films, and what themes would you like to see covered in a short film? These questions were helpful in really gaining a deep insight into the audience and therefore discovering how I can cater to the needs of the majority.
How did you analyse your responses?
Well, firstly, I can admit that I didn't receive as many responses to my online survey as I did in tasks for my previous project. However, I received a fair amount of data and I managed to track this using the website SurveyMonkey. After about a month of the survey being up, I gathered my responses together and marked the patterns I could find in the demographic I was reaching. In terms of people I surveyed, it seemed that my primary audience is female, aged 16 to 22, and are generally used to watching mainstream feature films. This provided me with an incentive to create a short film with a strong narrative that would be interesting to those who are used to consuming more mainstream media.
How useful was the feedback you received from your focus group?
The feedback I got from my focus group was fairly useful in the reshoots for my film, as I showed them a copy of the assembly edit. So they gave me some ideas as to what to improve following the reshoots, and for example, they mentioned how they liked the action in one particular scene where the sister slaps the other sister, but they prefer it to be more fast-paced to make it more realistic. So then when I did my reshoots, I took that on board and I tried to make it as realistic as possible. Another reason that the focus group was effective is because I did an introduction before we talked about the assembly edit. And so in the introduction, I kind of got an idea of this particular group of people's film habits, the things they like to consume, what they like to see in a film, and just an idea of how to market to this particular audience.
Did you conduct research for any of your ancillary tasks?
Yes, I did conduct research for my ancillary tasks. However, the research I conducted was more focused around my poster than the review, as I believe that the poster is a task that perhaps was more important for audience feedback, as a poster is something that is used to draw the audience to the film. I do understand that the review is used for that purpose as well, but I feel that the poster holds a higher ranking over the review in terms of audience reaction and opinion. So I composed a questionnaire for people to fill out, my audience to fill out in terms of the poster. I provided 4 test images and questions such as what connotations can you infer about the film and which image is most appealing to you as an audience member. I got a few responses from people who are in my target audience bracket. I got a lot of different feedback on different images. It gave me a good understanding into what kind of thing the audience expect to see and what they like to see in a poster. For example, a few of the responses I received mentioned that they liked the mysterious and gritty feel of the posters, which is perhaps produced by the use of low-key lighting, dark colour palette, mysterious iconography. But overall, one of the most interesting things that I found was that the audience were quite concerned with what was conventional for a typical film poster, which suggests that they prefer to see a conventional style poster rather than an unusual, perhaps more niche film poster.
How did the feedback affect the final outcome of your poster?
I think the audience feedback did affect how the poster turned out, and one of the ways it did is that the final draft of the poster, the image I used, was an image that wasn't as popular in the audience research, but the people who did like it said that it was one of the strongest images. And obviously, when you have a film poster, the best thing is that it's striking and it's something that wouldn't attract an audience, which is obviously the main purpose. So that is the main thing that you want with a film poster. And basically I took that image that people said was the strongest and that I also agreed was the strongest, and I basically tried to make it as strong as possible using orange text to make it stand out more, just really bring out the image. And I took on board what the audience talked about with lighting, which is that they preferred the Loki lighting as it created a mysterious feeling and obviously made the audience more interested into what the film could be about.
What were the most positive things you got from your audience research?
I think one of the most positive things about my audience research was that I got a strong idea about the age group demographic that I would be promoting my film to, and I got to actually speak to a lot of people who fit the description, and I was able to get their opinions, ask them for advice, find out what they'd like to see in a film, which is what I got a lot of. So I managed to find out what the people in my target audience would like to see, and then I was able to construct my film based on this research that I had done and the responses that I got. The audience research was, as a whole, very responsible for most of my film. The genre, perhaps the age of the characters, as well as just the plot in general, as I believe that this was something the audience would like to see and they'll be quite popular with this audience.
Do you believe that majority of your audience can relate to your film?
This is an interesting question, as throughout the filming, pre-production, production of my film, one of my main aims was to create a relatable piece of media for the audience to consume. So as my audience was about aged 16 to 22, mainly females, quite used to consuming different types of media, I tried to come up with ideas, characters, plot points that this kind of audience would enjoy and be able to relate to. So one thing that I did with my film is made the cast, the characters, around the same age, so they were all around about 17, as I believe that having the characters the same age as the audience would perhaps make the audience more able to relate to perhaps the struggles, what happens in the film, and they could all try and think of an experience of their own that relates, because typically an audience member is more likely to enjoy the film if they have some kind of way to relate in any way possible. And my film is quite easy to relate to, as it combines the dynamic of first date, a first romantic relationship with someone, and also the sisters, so the family dynamic, and most people can relate to perhaps having a sibling that they disagree with, or even having a family member that they can clash with occasionally.
Thank you for coming in today and sharing with us the secrets of the screen, Amber.
It's been great. Thank you for having me.
All of us are here very much looking forward to the release of First Impressions. We'd love to have you back again anytime.